Here's the top Vancouver suburbs that you can afford to buy in based on your salary. Okay, so we're gonna begin with incomes between $100,000 and $150,000. And falling into that category, there's just one city, and that is the city of Abbotsford. Abbotsford is to the east of Vancouver. It has a population of 175,120 people. It's 71 kilometers out of Vancouver, one of Vancouver's more distant suburbs, but you can commute from there, and many people do. It takes an hour and 10 minutes to get into the city on any given morning for 9 a.m., but it could take you as long as 2 hours and 20 minutes. In order to buy a home in Abbotsford, you're looking at a typical expense that the HPI price index at the moment in February of 2023 is $783,000, and that was an increase of approximately 7% over the previous year. The best possible interest rate at that price is approximately 5.19%, and I'm taking these interest rates off of ratehub.ca. We're looking at basically just two interest rates, whether you're below $1 million or above $1 million. They gave me two different interest rates for that. But in this case, under $1 million, you're looking at 5.19%. That works out to a monthly mortgage payment of $3,711. And you're gonna need approximately an income of $12,370 per month in order to afford that. And that's approximately 30% of your income. I'm not going up to the maximum threshold, which is 35%, because it's meant to include things like property tax and maintenance fees. So I'm giving a little bit of wiggle room there. But on that 30%, your income needs to be $12,370 in order to afford a typical home in Abbotsford. And that works out to an annual household income of $148,440. Next, we're looking at incomes between $150,000 and $175,000. And we have three cities that we're going to be looking at in that range. We're going to start with New Westminster. So we just went with previous, Abbotsford is the furthest suburb that we're going to find. New Westminster is actually one of the closer suburbs. And if you want to be close to the city of Vancouver, it looks like a pretty amazing deal. 88,840 people live in New Westminster, and it's just 21 kilometers outside of Vancouver. It's going to take you 35 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes on any given weekday to commute into Vancouver for a 9 a.m. start time. The typical home in New Westminster these days in February 2024 is at $815,000. That's an increase of 4.1% over the previous year. Now, at a 5.19 interest rate for a 5-year fixed mortgage, you're looking at $3,863 as a mortgage payment every single month. And that works out to 30% of a required income, that is $12,877. Total income that's required in order to purchase a typical home in New Westminster is $155,000 annually. Next, we're looking at Pitt Meadows, and we're going a little further out. Once again, there's 20,942 people that live in Pitt Meadows. It's 39 kilometers to the east of Vancouver. And it's going to take you approximately 50 minutes to an hour and 50 minutes to commute into Vancouver. The typical property in Pitt Meadows these days is $898,100. That's a massive increase of 9.5%. I believe that's the biggest increase that we're seeing of any of the areas around Vancouver. With a 5.19% mortgage rate, you're looking at a monthly payment of $4,298 a month. And that works out to a required income of $14,327 monthly, and that is $171,924 that's required as a household income annually in order to buy a typical house in Pitt Meadows. Finally, we're looking at Mission, and Mission has a population of 49,923 people. It's 75 kilometers to the east of Vancouver, so a little further than Abbotsford is. It's going to take you an hour and 15 minutes to 2.5 hours in order to commute into Vancouver, if that's what you want to do. Typical property in Mission is $911,700. That's a big increase again of 8.4% over the previous year. That's gonna be a mortgage payment of $4,321 at 5.19% interest. You're gonna need a monthly income of $14,403 in order to afford that typical home in Mission. And that works out to a household annual income of $172,836. Now we're moving on to $175,000 to $200,000 of annual income. And we're going to start off with Port Coquitlam. And Port Coquitlam has a population of 66,813. It's 30 kilometers just east of Vancouver, and it's going to take you roughly 40 minutes to an hour and a half to commute into Vancouver. A typical home in Port Coquitlam in February 2024 is approximately $929,900. That's an increase of 4.4% annually. And the best possible mortgage rate that we can get at the moment is 5.19%. That's going to be a mortgage payment of $4,407. And in order to afford that mortgage payment, you're going to need a monthly income of $14,690. And that works out to a required household income of $176,280. Next is White Rock. And White Rock has a population of 22,244. It's 50 kilometers to the south. It's going to be roughly 55 minutes to an hour and 50 minutes in order to commute into Vancouver. A typical property in White Rock is $948,600. This is the lowest increase we've seen of any of the suburbs of Vancouver, but it was just an increase of 1.1% over the last year. Now, at an interest rate of 5.19% for a 5-year fixed mortgage, you're looking at a mortgage payment of $4,496 every month. That works out to a required monthly income of $14,987 and an annual income of $179,844. Next is Maple Ridge. Maple Ridge has a population of 99,473. It's 45 kilometers to the east of Vancouver. It's going to take you roughly 1 to 2 hours to commute, depending on traffic. And a typical home in Maple Ridge is $958,400, which was an increase of 6.2% over the last year. At a mortgage rate of 5.19%, you're looking at a monthly mortgage payment of $4,543. And that works out to a required monthly income of $15,143, or an annual household income of $181,716. Finally, in this category, we have Langley. This includes the district and the city of Langley. In that entire area, you have 179,663 people. This is 47 kilometers to the east of Vancouver, and it's going to take you roughly 1 hour to 2 hours and 10 minutes, depending on traffic, to commute into the city of Vancouver. And a typical property in Langley these days is $1,019,200. That's an increase of 6.6% annually. And this is the first one where we're going over $1 million. So now we're looking at interest rates of 5.29%, and that works out to $4,878 as a monthly mortgage payment. In order to afford that, you're going to need a monthly income of $16,260, and that works out to an annual household income of $195,120. So as you can probably tell, moving to Vancouver is kind of complicated. Moving around these areas is pretty complex. There's lots of ins and outs to understand, but that's what I do. I've helped hundreds of families move to Vancouver. I can help you as well. If you are thinking of moving here and purchasing a home, be sure to reach out. My contact information is right there on the screen. We can begin that conversation. I'd love to help you and your family settle in Metro Vancouver, no matter where it happens to be. Now let's get back to the video. And now we're looking at slightly higher incomes between $200,000 and $225,000. And we're gonna start off with the city of Burnaby, and that's the suburb that's directly to the east of Vancouver. Technically, it's 13 kilometers away from the center of Vancouver. There's 278,505 people that live in Burnaby. It's going to take them roughly 25 minutes to 55 minutes, depending on traffic, to commute into downtown Vancouver. The typical home in Burnaby these days is $1,051,500. That was an annual increase of 3.5%. At a mortgage rate of 5.29 for a 5-year fixed mortgage, it's going to cost $5,032 for that monthly mortgage payment. And in order to afford that monthly mortgage payment, you're gonna need a monthly income of $16,773. That works out to an annual household income of $201,276. Next, we're moving on out to Surrey. And Surrey is the second largest municipality in the entire region. It's gonna be overtaking the size of Vancouver in the next few years, but at the moment, it has 650 259,126 residents. It's 34 kilometers to the southeast of Vancouver, and it's going to take you 50 minutes to an hour and 50 minutes to commute on a typical weekday morning to arrive at 9 a.m. in downtown Vancouver. A typical home in Surrey these days costs $1,064,100, and that's an increase of 4.4%. With a mortgage rate of 5.29%, that's going to work out to roughly $5,093 for a mortgage payment every single month. And in order to afford that mortgage payment, the bank's going to want to see a income of $16,977 every single month, or an annual household income of $203,724. Next, we're moving on to Coquitlam, and Coquitlam is to the east of Vancouver. It has 167,377 residents. It's 28 kilometers away, and it takes roughly 40 minutes to an hour and 30 minutes in order to commute into Vancouver. A typical home in Coquitlam is going to run you $1,087,800. That was an annual increase of 2.4%. At 5.29% interest, you're looking at a monthly mortgage payment of $5,206. In order to afford that payment, you're going to need a monthly income of $17,353, which works out to an annual household income of $208,236. Next, we're going to move on to Coquitlam's neighbor, which is Port Moody. In Port Moody, it's 39,098 residents, are 23 kilometers to the east of Vancouver. It's going to take you 35 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes to commute into Vancouver from there. And a typical home in Port Moody in February 2024 costs $1,092,300. That was an annual increase of 1.4%. At a mortgage rate of 5.29%, it works out to a monthly mortgage payment of $5,228, and you're going to need a monthly income of $17,427 in order to afford that mortgage. This works out to an annual household income of $209,124. And now we're going to move to Ladner, which is to the south of Vancouver, where 23,016 people live. It's 27 kilometers to the south, and it's going to take you 40 minutes to an hour and 25 minutes to commute into Vancouver. Typical home in Ladner right now in February 2024 costs $1,115,800. And that was with an increase of 6.5% over the last year. At a mortgage rate of 5.29%, it works out to a monthly mortgage payment of $5,340. And in order to afford that payment, you're going to need a monthly income of $17,800, which works out to an annual household income of $213,600. Lastly, in this category, we're looking at the municipality just to the south of Vancouver, which is the city of Richmond. That's where 228,587 people live. It's just 15 kilometers from there to downtown Vancouver, and that's going to take you roughly 25 minutes to an hour and 5 minutes to commute into downtown Vancouver. A typical home in Richmond in February 2024 costs $1,140,500. That's an annual increase of 3%. At 5.29% interest on a 5-year fixed mortgage, that's going to cost you $5,458 in monthly mortgage payments. And in order to afford that payment, the bank's going to want to see a monthly income of $18,193, or an annual household income of $218,316. We're inching up into those higher incomes, and now we're looking at $225,000 to $250,000. And we have 3 municipalities in those areas. First, we're looking at Tsawwassen, and Tsawwassen has 23,940 people. If you recall my video about the weather and the best places to live for the best weather in Vancouver, this is it. Tsawwassen has the best weather, the most mild temperatures, the most sun, and the least amount of rain. And as a result, people really love Tsawwassen. Lots of people moving out there. It's 37 kilometers to the south of Vancouver. It's going to take you roughly 45 minutes to an hour and a half to commute into downtown Vancouver from there. A typical home in Tsawwassen in February 2024 is going to cost you $1,190,400. That's an increase of 6.3% over a year ago. And at an interest rate of 5.29%, a monthly mortgage payment is going going to cost you $5,697. The bank's going to require you to have a monthly income of $18,990 to afford that mortgage payment. And that works out to an annual household income of $227,880. And now we have the city of Vancouver itself. There's 722,014 people that live in Vancouver in 2023. A typical home in Vancouver in February 2024 is going to cost you $1,248,400. And that's an annual increase of 5.3%. Interest rate of 5.29%. That works out to a monthly payment of $5,975. And a bank's going to want to see income of $19,917 from you in order to afford that payment, which works out to an annual household income of $239,004. Now, are there more expensive places to live in Metro Vancouver than the city of Vancouver? The answer is yes. There are two of them, and we're going to get into one of them right now, which is North Vancouver. There's 159,365 people that live in North Vancouver, and as the name suggests, it's directly to the north of the city of Vancouver. It's just 10 kilometers away. It's a pretty quick commute, depending on how you get from North Vancouver to Vancouver, but it could take you as little as 18 minutes or as long as 40 minutes on any given weekday morning for a 9 a.m. start time. The typical home in North Vancouver is going for $1,350,200, and its annual increase of 4.4%. At 5.29% interest, a monthly mortgage payment is going to cost you $6,462, and a bank's going to require a monthly income of $21,540 from you in order to afford that payment. That works out to an annual household income of $258,480. And finally, we're looking at incomes over $250,000, and the one suburb that qualifies is the city of West Vancouver. West Vancouver has a population of 46,113 people. It's 8 kilometers to the northwest of the city of Vancouver. It's going to take you roughly 14 minutes to 28 minutes to commute into downtown Vancouver. The typical home, wait for it, in West Vancouver is $2,587,900. That's an increase of 3.1% over a year ago. At 5.29% interest, that's going to require a mortgage payment of $12,385 every single month, and an income in order to afford that monthly mortgage payment of $41,283 monthly, which works out to an annual household income of $495,396. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that overview of affordability in Metro Vancouver. We looked at all the major suburbs and all of the different price points that you can find throughout Vancouver, and hopefully you have a really strong idea of what makes sense for you and your family when you're thinking of moving here. If you are thinking of moving here and purchasing a home, be sure to reach out. I am a real estate agent that's helped hundreds of families move to Metro Vancouver over the last, I think it's been 18 years now. And if you are enjoying these videos, be sure to check out all of my other videos as well, as I really go in depth on a lot of neighborhoods, a lot of suburbs. And I've been doing these videos for over a year now, and I have dozens and dozens of them. I think we're at about 50. So there's a lot of information out there for you that can really help you understand what you're getting into when you're moving throughout Metro Vancouver. Now, hit that like button if you got any kind of value out of this video, and smash the subscribe button if you want to see more content just like this one. Be sure to check out my next video, which I'll be back right here next week. But I would love to meet you in one of these two videos. This one over here is about the best Vancouver suburbs, and then this one over here is all about things people don't tell you about moving to Vancouver. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you on next week's video.